All hope is lost. All hope is lost. The end is here. We are doomed. We are doomed. Oh, no one ever actually pays me any attention. I always get nervous at this part. Come closer. I got something to show you. Oh, you don't wanna? I didn't say you have a choice. You're finally awake. You're finally awake. Someone's gonna listen to me. Someone's gonna listen to me. Come on, Doom. Come on, Doom. You've practiced for this. In a free market, doing what it takes to get ahead must be done, or a competitor will do it first and reap the benefits. The only thing stopping this is the market itself and regulation. But what if a technique comes along that overrides the market, takes away consumer choice? In game theory, this type of thinking is called the prisoner's dilemma, which is somehow not related to your current predicament. Oxford's dictionary defines this as a situation in which two players each have two options whose outcome depends crucially on the simultaneous choice made by the other. In market terms, this could be a moral line in the sand, not discouraged by regulations, that would leave any corporations unwilling to commit such an act on the outside looking in. This is why regulations are so crucial. Does polluting the environment in some way lead to a bigger profit? Then any companies in the sector unwilling to pollute simply lose market share to companies who put profits over everything else. If the government won't step in, as in the US, then the market could theoretically eradicate this behavior with a properly educated populace and tons of consumer choice. Sadly, it seems high polluters would rather have their cake and eat it too by using disinformation and lobbying to cultivate a naive public who vote against their best interest. This principle of win at all costs business also applies to advertising. Nothing is sacred when the other guy could gain that advantage first. If brainwashing their customer base is not regulated by the law, then why wouldn't a company brainwash to increase market share? Why wouldn't I? The foundation of our corporate surveillance state can be traced back to Claude C. Hopkins and his 1923 book, Scientific Advertising. It's a meandering, tasteless textbook that explains in detail the core concepts that would eventually lead to our current lack of privacy and the copious amounts of advertisements in daily life. I am of the opinion that technological advancement under a system that rewards the techniques laid out in Hopkins' book would eventually lead to where we are today, a hyper-surveilled and psychologically manipulated society. Hopkins was a born salesman and the son of a newspaper printer, exposing him to marketing at a young age. As a boy, he learned some basic advertising rules when he handed out handbills, comparing his conversion rate to other boys. Hopkins also sold his mother's formula for silver polish door to door, noting that it sold better when he demonstrated its effectiveness. These experiences birthed a snake willing to write such a monstrous book as Scientific Advertising. Oh, ignore them. They weren't a very good listener. But you, I like you. Sitting there, listening so good. You're my new best friend. Hopefully you listen longer than my other best friends. Will you shut up? Don't make me go in there and read you another story. Roommates, am I right? Now where were we? The time has come when advertising has in some hands reached the status of a science. It is based on fixed principles and reasonably exact. The causes and effects have been analyzed until they are well understood. The correct methods of procedure have been proved and established. We know what is most effective when we act on basic laws. This is just a preview of how Hopkins views his field, one of science and precision. But advertising is a social science. There are no guarantees. Shh. Stop thinking those silly little thoughts of yours. I can read your heart. Just listen. Looking at how Hopkins views his field, it is one with predictable and measured outcomes. When dealing with the human mind, exactness becomes brainwashing. According to Merriam-Webster, Brainwashing means a forcible indoctrination to induce someone to give up basic political, social, or religious beliefs and attitudes and to accept contrasting regimented ideas, and persuaded by propaganda or salesmanship. The scientific pursuit of persuasion is no different than brainwashing, which is why you are here. You are brainwashed, and I will counter brainwash the standard brainwash. Your brain will be so clean. That's how I take my brains. Unstained, untainted, pure. Some of the tactics Hopkins standardized, test campaigns, samples, and branding, aid in the selling to and deceiving of good people. Test campaigns are the most obvious of his tactics. Experiment with a bunch of smaller studies on various campaigns and expand the market with the most successful, i.e., try it out on a small sample size with smaller upfront costs and expand to the bigger sample size when you find out what works. As much as I hate this lizard person, I did take some of his advice. Do you think you are the first to listen? It took lots and lots of tries before you people began to listen to me. But any good chef has to burn a few in the oven to get the right recipe. This honing of the campaigns in a scientific manner over a long enough timescale will lead to brainwashing. It is the only route. Whether intentional or not, the effectiveness of scientific advertising combined with the study of the brain and human psychology will eventually lead to compulsion over choice. This quote from Hopkins in particular stands out to me. The advertising man studies the consumer. He tries to place himself in the position of the buyer. Success largely depends on doing that to the exclusion of everything else. Here, Hopkins touches on something that he mentions throughout the book. Admin who don't use these techniques lose. Any advertiser who sees brainwashing or psychological manipulation as an immoral act will lose out to the advertiser who only cares for winning over your impressionable little minds. Did you hear that? They send frequencies through my walls, through my computer. I see their faces in my TV, but only I can hear their song. As long as I spread their message, they won't take me. I must get listeners, such as you, my mouth-watering audience. You must understand. I don't want to be taken. I think they're gone now, thanks to you and your good listening ears and your good watching eyes. Brainwashing. This technique of precise advertising must be accompanied by keying, wherein the advertiser makes it known what advertising technique got which customers. A modern day cut and dry example of this technique is when content creators give specific to them coupon codes. This allows the company to track how well the influencer did their job, getting people to use the coupon. Hopkins also popularized samples. Giving out samples allows the use of the most powerful word in advertising, free. Samples also help with keying, as you can give different coupons to different sources to track the success of different advertising campaigns. Free samples also assist with the most influential idea in Hopkins' book, acquiring customer information. In Hopkins' day, samples bought an interested party's name and address by sending mail-in vouchers that needed a return address. Alongside keying, this allowed Hopkins to tell which campaign worked on which demographic. Sound familiar? Today, the mass gathering of information has led to our current predicament, a dystopian-style mass surveillance society. Unlike those novels in the past, the information gathering is done not as propaganda enforcement, but advertising analytics. These spying devices are all quote unquote optional, of course, but as someone who has tried my hardest to get away from these information gathering machines, it does not feel so voluntary to me. Restaurant menus, doctor's office records, appointment check-ins, dating services, college homework, and more all require the use of devices that track you, and that is without mentioning peer pressure, which almost forces the use of social media for certain types of communication. I still persist in this effort, only coming to the heavily surveilled DoomCity to proselytize to you, my delectable audience. Wake up! Wake up! You have been a good listener so far, don't botch it. Hopkins also popularized branding. something so synonymous with advertising today that Americans can't imagine our world without it. People can be made sick or well by mental impressions, Hopkins says, that can be made to favor a certain brand in that way, and that, on some lines, is the only way to win them. Branding is touched on heavily in scientific advertising. There are multiple sections about reducing the soulless corporation to a man who takes pride in his accomplishments. The name itself is often important. We can think about Hydrox cookies versus Oreos. Oreos sounds like a fun cookie to dip in milk. Hydrox sounds like a floor cleaner I would mix with vodka. Oreos are a knockoff of Hydrox but have a stronger and more appetizing brand image. Hopkins realized this. The product itself should be its own best salesman, not the product alone, but the product plus a mental impression and the atmosphere you place around it. Hopkins also talks about advertising tone, not just the branding of the product, but what is in and around the advertisements. A product that is high priced should be about quality and project an image of luxury. Successful, attractive people should be included in any copy, and the tone should be consistent. All the advertisements for a brand should communicate in the same style, even if they are aimed at different audiences. In successful advertising, great pains are taken to never change our tone, Hopkins says. This has evolved to certain segments of our population defining themselves by the tone projected from the brands they buy. In America, F-150s are bought by manly men, Gucci by quote-unquote rich people. This navigation of brand identities for certain segments of the population takes up resources that could be better devoted to more important priorities. Keeping up with the Joneses is not new, but the acceleration of brand identities combined with the rise of social media have made this a contagion. This is where it becomes brainwashing. People ignore their sense of value and the quality of the physical product in favor of logos and labels to project the tone from their advertisements. What is most nefarious about this process is its decentralization. Individual marketers, influencers, and executives might not set out with the goal of brainwashing a populace like a dictator's propaganda department would, but when the shareholders come calling, psychological tricks won't be off limits. How is this possible? Why hasn't this been stopped? Why are there bugs crawling under my skin? This continues and gets worse to this day due to the same reason some of you consider this ridiculous: depersonalization. Depersonalization is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as the action of divesting someone or something of human characteristics or individuality. One line from Slimeball Hopkins that points to his view of the quote-unquote consumer as cattle is, "But they are based on a knowledge of human nature. The writers know how people are led to buy." The only thing you have in common with cattle, my dear audience, is that you are delicious, but I would never depersonalize you as a group. Depersonalization is something most terrible systems have in common. I believe the majority of people are not inherently bad, but can be nudged to commit terrible acts to secure more resources or safety. And even then, people will behave reasonably if the act is too terrible. If a society is shouting at individuals from all directions that wrong acts are right, who are they to question the status quo and deprive themselves of resources? Words like consumer, users, and buyers take away your personhood and defines you as a group ready to be manipulated. But you are more than that. Hopkins himself uses this type of dehumanizing language all throughout his book. This quote in particular exemplifies this mindset. The competent advertising man must understand psychology. The more he knows about it, the better. He must learn that certain effects lead to certain reactions and use that knowledge to increase results and avoid mistakes. Notice how he doesn't draw the line between the admin and the public for which they are manipulating? These reactions are in a void, not one of free will. Shows how detached he is from the people he sells to. You are just trees from which to harvest money from. The mentally ill, the intentionally undereducated, and the intellectually handicapped already have enough problems to deal with. We should not have to navigate legally sanctioned mass psychological manipulation. But in our world where money is power, technology and science will only be used to further enrich those with no morals. With the future of AI and an even more advanced understanding of the brain, people will be born just to have these psychological experiments unwillingly done on them in the name of profits. Hopkins says, "It is a very shrewd thing to watch the development of a popular trend, the creation of new desires. It can every year be done on new things which some popular fashion or widespread influence is bringing into vogue. But it is a very different thing to create that fashion, taste, or influence for all in your field to share. I foresee a future, if we aren't already there, where there is no hope to overcome these manipulators. Listen to the words from these leeches' mouths and take from it this: corporations are not our friends. They don't see us as individuals with dreams, goals, desires, weaknesses, passions, cravings. They see us as money printers with buttons to push.